any more ado from me, I want to introduce Ian Steppler for this afternoon's presentation on incorporating crane wearing programs for your operation. We're going to kick some imports butt. So, thanks, Ian.
Thanks for that, John. So as we go here in the afternoon, just feel free to, if you have any questions, just throw them out to the front. A little more casual and laid back than keynote speaks in the morning. So feel free just to voice up and throw some input out. So today I want to talk to you about kicking imports, how I was able to shift my entire management plan to rear my own queens, to be able to develop out my own stock. Up in Canada, we're very, very reliant on import stock coming in to supply our queen needs. And there's always the old saying is we can't beekeep without these imports coming in. But it's just, I felt I was just losing too much control in my operation and I had to change something. So I switched my entire operation into a self-sustainable queen rearing operation. I just want to bring a little bit of this to you guys. My voice is, I'm not used to talking so much, so my voice is going to start to fade away as the afternoon goes, so you'll have to forgive me. But within my operation, I need roughly about 1,500, I have a 1,500 apiary operation. I need roughly 500, 600 queens annually. So that's kind of my goal every season is to be able to either bring in or raise 500, 600 queens annually. I used to bring them in from a lot of places, from the US, from Hawaii, New Zealand, Chile. So I was bringing queens in from all around the world into my operation. So for the reasons why I kicked imports, there's a few reasons. You always hear about beekeepers complain about quality and longevity coming from these queen breeders. And I'm not going to stand up here and bash or diss queen breeders and the work that they're doing, because these guys are doing a terrific job managing their operations and developing queens for all of us to use. They do an absolutely fantastic job, and they could walk circles around me. It's just from their queen bank through shipment into my queen bank and into my nuke, there's a disconnect going on there. For some reason, we're running into quality issues, whether it's disease or whatever it is. We're getting queens that are duds, and longevity. We just don't seem to be able to get that 2 years out of the queens anymore. Guys used to talk about getting 3 years out of queens, but now we're lucky to get a season and a half. So there's a disconnect there that we have to address. Availability is one of the reasons why I switched off. Typically, it's about this time of year. I'm phoning up BMAID trying to predict how many queens I'm going to need through the season before winter's even through, before I even know how many queens I need. So we're booking our delivery dates, and I don't know about beekeepers around here, but beekeepers back home are terrible planners. So it comes in the middle of May when we need all our queens. Everybody's going to BMAID asking for queens, and they simply don't have enough to go around. So it just adds a layer of complexity into our management. Logistics and managing weather. This is probably the biggest reason why I've switched into raising my own queens. Now, there's nothing worse than, you're middle of spring and you have 200 queens sitting on your desk and you can't get the work done because of your weather, and there's more queens coming in because you had it scheduled and you just can't get this work done. It just adds a whole layer of stress to our management program. I had to get away. It just felt like I was losing control. And cost, like we're bringing these queens in for 45. I've ordered in some queens, some Saskatraz queens, probably $50 Canadian for us. And that's a lot of money. That's a lot of investment to be putting into our operation every year. It's cash flow that we got to manage. And biosecurity is another reason. I was bringing queens in from all around the world. And by doing that, you're bringing in all their problems also, right? So you're just kind of bringing their problems in your operation to have to deal with them. Many of the Canadian beekeepers back home who aren't with the queen rearing program right now are dabbling with it because they're aware of the fact that because they're so reliant on these imports coming in, that if for whatever reason this border closes to queens coming up from California, where we get the majority of our queens, they're all of a sudden stuck without having any queens to be able to manage their operations. So all these guys that are importing queens, I notice, are now dabbling with queen rearing, just so they are going through and they can kind of figure out all the problems associated and learn how to manage to rear these queens on their own, just in case that if that day comes or that border closes, and it could close just like that, and usually it's because of politics, for no reason whatsoever, they'll be able to then back up into a queen rearing program and just instantly establish something to move forward. So they're these guys are thinking ahead, just kind of protect ourselves as we go. We have a lot of challenges though back in Manitoba and rearing our own queens. And the unpredictable weather is probably our biggest challenge. It leads to inadequate mating. So we could easily have like 2 weeks like this, foggy, wet, crap weather come right when we're trying to mate these queens. And we might as well just shake those bees out in the grass, right? So, we have to be able to manage these weather issues. Rearing queens is a lot of work. Like I personally don't have enough time to be able to conduct all the grafting and operate the queen rearing program. So I've brought somebody in to do that for me. So we have to recognize it's going to cost us a little bit of work. And just for the very fact we can't meet our early queen requirements by making our own queens. We need our queens middle of May. That's typically when we split our hives. But drones aren't walking that time. We can't graft before the drone starts, so we don't physically have these queens that we rear ready for our hives for that early spring demand. So to address that, I shifted my whole mindset. I shifted my whole management strategy to a 2-year program. So instead of focusing on, bringing those early queens in to satisfy my early work, I shifted, I'm going to use that strength and I'm going to focus all my work into a 2-year program, develop those queens out to be used next year. By doing that, it allows me to focus on the best time to mate them, so I kind of manage a bit of that weather issue. And for up in our area, it's May and June is when the weather starts to settle out a little bit. And we develop these queens out through NUCS. So we set them up, we make a whole lot of NUCS, drop cells into them, and we just manage NUCS all through the summer into the winter. By making up these NUCS, we're also able to extract some revenue off these colonies. So by putting it through this procedure, instead of buying these queens in for $45, we're making the queens and they're actually making us money at the end of the season. So it's kind of a neat strategy I've employed. And by doing it, it's underlined help to fight attrition. It's been a really neat trick. So to start, I want to identify my breeders. So where do you start? So I employ the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. I don't like keeping records because I never do follow through with my record keeping, or if I do, I don't have time to actually assess the records to make use of them. So I figured, well, if I'm not going to adequately use record keeping, then why am I wasting my time? So what I do is I use a simple series of flags and tags. I'll just kind of show you how I do it. I'll start with these here. So these are my queen tags. This tells me when I put the queen into the colony, the date. Right here is a 2015. It tells me where they come from, their origin, whether they come from Hawaii or New Zealand or wherever, or whether if it's one of our own. If it's one of our own, we mark the breeder queen, just to tell us a little bit of information of that queen we put in. As I go through the apiary and I'm finding some brilliance, something that really makes me excited, I look at this colony, just love it, I tack it. I give a little tack there. And that tack just tells me that there's something about that hive that made me happy. And as I go through the year, Like in the spring, I go through, attack a bunch of colonies, and as I go through the year, any colony that pisses me off, I take that tack off, right? So by the end of the year, I'm only going to be assessing my breeders that have that tack in there. Throughout my spring assessments, I tack the big ones with blue tags because blue is my favorite color. So I have these, social tickets. These are drink tickets. So I use the blue ones, and I just leave them on there. So this is telling me that last spring, that was a strong hive. I probably made a split, made me some money. This year is a strong hive. I'm going to make a split off. It's going to make me some money. So that's telling me that there's vigor within that colony, instantly telling me that. So when I go around, I tell Carrie to go around, collect some breeders. She goes around through the apiary, and she's looking at that tag, that tack. She's looking at performance information that tells us there's something going on there that makes it productive, prosperous. And we're looking down here at this queen tag to see when that queen was established. And one of the things that I'm looking for within my apiary is longevity. Now, this is like last year, this is 2019, that's a 2015. That doesn't necessarily mean that's a 2015 queen. There's probably been multiple replacements. But that's telling me that colony has sustained itself since 2015 on its own. And that's what I want to promote within my stock, is that sustained nature of my bees. I don't want to go in there and replace that queen every year just to refresh. I want the bees to do it on their own. This is a strategy specific to my requirements. I know there's pollination guys that can't get away with that. They need to know the age of that queen in that colony. They need to know that that queen's only, a year old or less, because they're doing a lot of transportation and there's a lot of factors that compound each other. So they can't have old queens in here, and they can't have queen replacements happening while they switch out or move their stock around. But I can. This is what I'm focusing on. So this is what I'm kind of focusing my entire breeding program around, is what I want within my apiary. So when do we start grafting? Like when can we respectively start to make these queens? So we have to look at some, basics. Let's look at all the fundamentals here. So drone production season is about 20 weeks. Each colony will make 200 to 400 drones per week, per colony. Each colony is going to make roughly 4,800 drones per colony. And it takes like 4 to 5 weeks before that drone is sexually mature to be able to mate with queens. For about 2 months, their lifespan is about 2 months. So if you put all that together, if they start making drones, let's say in April, you're going to notice that these drones aren't sexually mature until June, May going into June. So that's the period of time we want to focus our queen rearing around, is when we have the most sexually mature drones available to mate with our queens. Each one of our queens is going to take roughly, they say 20 drones to mate. Could be 15, could be, I think I heard last night, up to 70. So that's a lot of drones. So we got to make sure there's all those drones available for them when we let these queens out. So once we start finding drones actively walking on our comb, we'll start grafting. Because when we start grafting, those queens won't emerge for another 10 days. So once you see those drones start hatching out, start to graft, because once those queens need to be mated, those drones will have enough time to develop themselves sexually. So that's the cue we use. Some years, we can push this up a little bit. We see drones walking on the comb end of April. It's like, holy shit, this is an early year. But last year is cold. And we didn't have drone production until well into May. So we had to wait until we actually seen those drones. Those drones started walking. We started rearing our queens. And then we had a fantastic mating season later in June. So I'm kind of kicking the beekeeper calendar, and I'm more so following what the hives are telling me themselves. So if they're early, we start the work early. If they're late, we follow through. We just got to be patient if we follow late. So where are we going to get our bees from? There's a number of places we can get the bees from. We can harvest the surplus strength. Like I was showing you earlier in the other presentation, we have our splits all made up with all the surplus strength here. Carrie's coming around, we're just making a shit ton of nukes. We just harvest all the brood and bees into a bunch of NUCs. So that's primarily how we make up our NUCs, is just by stripping all that surplus. Another way is simply pick that yard, and we just slash it down. So we go through, and I have guys working ahead of me finding queens. So they just find the queen, they cage it, and then we follow behind, and we just strip all the bees, all the brood from the boxes, and we leave the queen behind with just a little bit of bees and a little bit of food just to keep her going. I don't know if you guys will be able to get away with that with small hive beetle, just leaving it just a little nest like that behind. Well, that's what we do. That queen will go into a panic state and just rejuvenate that nest into something good again. And we've made a lot of NUCs up out of that yard. So we'll walk into a yard of 40 and we'll pull out 175 NUCs or something out of that yard and just strip them. That's an easy way to make up a lot of NUCs. Or we can go through the colonies, and as we're making our assessments and we identify the failing hives, not the dead hives, but the hives that we identify as not productive anymore, they seem to be failing. We can go in and we can salvage that nest. And we simply just we identify that nest as something's going on here, it's not as productive. Instead of dropping a queen in there, instead of spending money on that colony that's failing, we remove that colony, we salvage it, we drop it into a NUC, take it back to the mating yard and drop its queen cell in there. And then that empty spot is filled with a fresh NUC. It's just a way to continually refresh our apiary. So now to make the queens. So to make queens, we have to make a builder. And these builders are the hive that's going to be developing out these queen cells. So to make them, you gotta stock these builders with a lot of young bees. So before we start grafting, we make up our builders and we pick a yard. If we're going to pick that yard, we dedicate that yard solely to supplying bees for my builder. And we go through, I have my crew go ahead just finding the queen. So they waste their time finding the queen. Once they find her, they put her in a little queen cage and I follow behind and I strip the bees from those boxes. And I just leave them enough bees to be able to manage the workload they have at their hand. So I think it takes about 5 or 6 or 7 hives to make up a builder. And I set my builders up in a particular way. So the box looks like foundation, honey, pollen frame. Slot A is going to be my graft frame. In the center I have a brood frame that I cycle through. Slot B is another graft frame, pollen, honey, and then a frame feeder. And I run perpetually queenless units. So once I stock these builders, it's a queenless building system. They need lots of young bees. If there is any other factor that sticks in your mind right now, is you build queen cells with young bees. So you got to focus on stocking these builders with young bees and then continually rejuvenating that builder with young bees as you go. So usually I go through back to that same yard and harvest more bees from that yard and just shake like 2 or 3 pounds more bees every week into that builder. Or I rotate a brood frame, a capped mature brood frame through that builder every week. And there's young bees emerging the entire time. I rotate that brood frame out every week because if it's left in there too long, they might be making emergency cells. And it's instead of fighting and tearing down emergency cells and missing one to have them tear up all your work inside the builder, I found it's easier just to continually rotate that frame out every week. So then you're never, ever worried about rogue queens tearing down all the work that you try to have planned out for yourself. So it's argued that 200 nurse bees are needed to rear a queen cell. And each queen cell, they say, can be visited up to 10,000 times before it's capped. So of those 200 bees needed to rear that queen cell, we can assume that they share time between different queen cells, right? So they're not just focused on one. And we can also make the assumption that of those 10,000 visits, some of those are merely just inspections, right? Just to do an assessment to see if they have enough food or the development of that larvae or whatever within there. So if we take that 10,000 visits per cell, if I'm grafting out 30 cell per graft frame, that frame gets visited 300,000 times. So to stock these builders, just for simple math, I need, roughly 6,000 young bees to start out that graft frame. And if I'm starting 2 graft frames per nuke every week, I need 12,000 bees in there. So that just tells you the basics of what you got to stock these builders up with. So I employ a 4-day graft rotation. So I have my colony set up: foundation, honey, pollen, graft frame A, slot A, brood frame, graft frame, slot B, pollen, honey, feeder. So I'm including a graft frame every 4 days. So every frame, like a graft frame holds, let's say, about 30 cells to start. So I'll put a graft frame into slot A. Okay. After 4 days, I move that frame from slot A to slot B, and I put another graft frame into slot A. Another 4 days, I'll take that graft frame out of slot B, and it goes into an incubator. This one goes into B, and a new one comes into slot A. And the reason why I do this is because I feel that I want to keep that builder in a constant state of royal jelly production at all times. So I'm not only giving him a fresh frame to start every 4 days, but they're also finishing a frame every 4 days. So that means those bees, those young bees within that nest, are in a continuous state of jelly production. And I don't know, it's something I do, and I just feel it's better than to stop and start, as they develop out these frames. So it goes into slot A, slot B, then into the incubator on a 4-day rotation. So I'm starting out 30, like I'm only starting 1 frame per builder every day. So if I put 1 frame into here, the next day I'm putting the frame into here, next day into there, in a 4-day rotation. So every day I'm starting 30 frames in a continual rotation. So I'll have 30 mature cells coming to me every day once we start harvesting the cells. If I want more than 30 cells started every day, if I want 60, like we primarily do 60, you just duplicate the process, right? So you have one stage here. This is a duplicated process. If you want 90 cells every day, you just triplicate that, right? That's the secret behind this. You set up your system and you just duplicate it if you want more. So this is what our builder yard looks like. Here's Carrie. She's my queen making queen. Here's one row of 4, 30 cells every day. Here's the other row. So I'm getting 60 cells. Like, not all 60 are going to make it. She usually gets about 90 or 95% success rate on these cells. So we're pulling roughly 50 cells every day. So I got to make sure I have enough splits to be able to put 50 in every day. So I use everything that's rotated into a incubator. It's just a chick incubator, right? You put eggs in there. They work really well for queen cells. So on the 8th day, we transfer them into these little foam cups, and we put them in here. You got to be very careful on the 8th day after graft on these, because the cells are very delicate. You don't want to bruise them, so you have to be very swift, and you can't let them chill. You got to keep them so they don't get cold. So it's a really sensitive time for queen cells, so you spend a lot of attention being swift and careful putting them in here. And if you don't feel that you can achieve that, you can, in your hive here, instead of pulling this out to go into the incubator, just shift it over a frame so they can fully develop themselves out for another 2 days without actually having to disturb them. But I use it on the 8th day because it just makes for a beautiful rotation. 4 days, and everything just flows so nicely. And Carrie, she just loves every single cell that she makes. and she spends a lot of attention and carefulness putting them down into this case to put them in the incubator. We keep the incubator at 93 degrees. Some guys keep it at 94, a little hotter. Some guys keep it at 92. The guys that keep it at 92 just like to slow down the development process a little bit cooler. It doesn't take them as long to mature. So if you're working on the 10th day and you got to get them out to the NUCS, they're going to hatch, the guys will actually turn the incubator down to 92 degrees or whatever, just to slow the progress up a little bit. I keep it steady at 93 because we have like many generations of queens in here, so I keep it steady at 60% humidity. So I have like a little tub in here with a sponge that the fan kind of cycles through just to keep the humidity up. One of the reasons why I've adopted an incubator is, well, to suit this cycle that I have going on here, this program, but more so to manage weather. When I'm making, we have 50, 60 frames maturing every day. They have to be transferred into splits every day. If we have to dig into those colonies, into those builders, to pull out these cells to take to the yard on a cold, crappy day, it makes for miserable work. The bees are angry, the carrie's angry, like it's just not a pleasant environment. So by having an incubator here, by being able to put the cells into the incubator, just buys you a little bit of flexibility, so you don't have to dig into an angry colony when it's rainy out. You know, if it doesn't work to slip these guys into here on day 8, we can do it on day 9 or day 10. Or on day 10, if these are to be transferred out to our splits and it's miserable weather, we can leave them in here for another day and not worry about any of the cells hatching and destroying the builder and all this kind of stuff. So it just helps us manage the weather a little bit better. Here's Carrie. She's doing the graft for me. She grafts every day. What she does, we have our breeder yard beside the builder yard. She pulls her truck up. We have this nifty little tray, hitches onto the steering wheel. She digs through the breeders. She finds that we don't spend a lot of attention. There's no process around our breeder frames as it's laid out. We just go through and we find a frame that has an adequate aged larvae. She goes through, she finds a frame she likes. She hops in her truck, turns up the heat, turns on the radio. Nice environment. She just spends a little bit of time there grafting queens. Works really well. And after about 48 hours inside the builder, this is what you should see. Cells brimming full of royal jelly, nice wax nicely pulled down, and hives just hanging, like that frame should be hanging full of bees. We use, we're doing this process, and there's a lot of counting. You're grafting, and then about 5 days later, they cap the cell, and then you transfer to the incubator on day 8, and then back into they got to get them out to the NUCS on day 10, and they're going to hatch on day 12. So you're always counting numbers, always counting on the calendars, and always getting mixed up. So I use this little nifty graft disc. I don't even know what you call it, but it just, it's like a slide rule, and it just helps you line up your time of all the work that you got to do to the date. And then you can transfer all that information onto these cards. So, this card will be filled out for when it was grafted, and then we're going to fill out when it needs to be transferred to the incubator, and transferred into the NUCS, and then other information here when we want to go and further inspect those mated colonies to check for queen laying. So this card is my tracker card, so it's going to follow my graft frame through the whole process. So there's a frame in slot A right now. When it gets transferred into slot B, this card goes and stick it in front of slot B. And then when it's transferred into the incubator, that card is then transferred down to the tray within my incubator, so we know all the information that needs to be known about those cells. And then as we transfer these cells to the NUCS, all this information is then transferred onto our cards, our cards that we put in front of the colonies. And another thing I like about this is, like, I'm not doing this work myself. I'm out in the yards doing other things. Carrie's doing all this work. It just provides a line of communication between me and Carrie without having to talk. So without this card, I come at the end of the day, I have to interrogate her and, what did you do? How did you do it? All this stuff. But with this card, I don't even have to talk to her. I just go back to the builder yard and just look at the card. Oh yeah, she's grafted. I can be rest assured. Yeah, she's transferred everything over. Yeah, she's put the cells in here, and I can check the trays, and oh yeah, all the cells that are going to be hatching today, they've already been taken out. So just that line of communication has been so important, just adds that fluid nature to the management. So on day 10 after graft, I always talk after graft when I count my days. Day 10 after graft, we transfer into the NUCS. On day 11, they're hot. They're probably best to transfer when they're hot because they're not as delicate. Day 12, they hatch. So that's a time schedule that is unforgiving. So you better get them out there, because if you don't, they're going to start hatching on you. Queens don't hatch, they emerge. I say hatch all the time. It's just something I do. So you'll have to put up with me with that. But anyways, we're on day 12, and a little queenie here is hatching. She's a virgin. Our farm, we don't deal with virgins because they're just a pain in the ass. It just adds a layer of work. I know a lot of guys that'll let their queens emerge and then transfer them to the cells like this, but we don't. So I can't comment any way, one way or the other, which is best or not, because I actually haven't done it this way. I just find it easier to drop the cell in and then forget about it, rather than having to cage all these little babies and then, introduce them into the hives. Yeah, the question is, do I drop more than one cell per nuke? And I always only drop one cell, except if I have a whole bunch of extra they're going to hatch out on me, I give them two, because then the first one out's going to kill the other one anyways. Yeah. And then after I drop them into the nukes, we'll come through. Rule of thumb is you leave them alone. But I like to go through and just poke the lid after 3 days to see if she's actually hatched, because some of them don't. And if they don't, then we'll mark it, then we'll come back with another cell and drop a cell in there. Yeah, that's a good question. So your question is whether or not I call my cells before I take them out to the nukes. And we do, kind of. Any cell, like a big cell or a short cell, it doesn't make any difference to me. You can get good queens from a short cell. It's all about how much is being fed inside. So we do take a look at that queen cup. And the nice thing about these plastic cups is you can see the royal jelly in there. So these cells that are being transferred, what I want to see is a little bit of royal jelly in there, but mostly consumed. If we see a cell that's right full of jelly, that queen's probably dead because she should have been eating that jelly. So we do call them on that process. If we see like a cell, sometimes those builders get so ambitious that they fill the jelly out down into the wax. So I call out that cell, and that queen, was nothing wrong with that queen. So it's like, ugh. But most of the time, under typical conditions, they'll fill that cup up, and then they'll consume, so you can see some of that consumption. That tells you that queen's alive. Yeah, that's as far as we go on that. Would I use that queen? Probably not, because the reason why this queen, there's probably nothing wrong with her, but the reason why this queen is hatched out on me is because I didn't have enough splits ahead of me to find a place for her to go. So this one will be pinched off. It's unfortunate. Carrie cries every time we pinch a queen. But it's just the way it is, right? I know guys that do introduce virgins, and there's probably a lot of discussion around this. I just feel it's better for a queen cell to emerge into the colony, so then whatever attention that queen needs right off the start, she'll get from those bees. Because those queens need a lot of protein right off the start when their development. And I just feel that if we interrupt that process, probably that delay, are we causing harm to the queen or to its development or not? I don't know. I can't really comment on that. But the reason why I don't go with virgins is because I want to keep it as natural as possibly within that colony. Yes, sir.
What is the success rate you have of successful mating, and how do you handle colonies that the queen didn't make it back?
Yeah, so the question is, what's my success rate on matings, as you're specifically talking about? My queen cell emergence, we'll have like 98% emerge, and we'll have 2% that don't emerge, so we follow through. But for actual matings, it all depends on your weather, of course. The last few years, we've been very fortunate. We're getting 95% nicely mated laying queens. I think if you talk within the industry, and if I would look over long term, 75% is probably your standard. You're making up 100 nukes, 75% of those are going to have good laying queens in there. So I think like 75%, 80% is probably what you typically would find.
Now, the colonies, the nukes that the queen didn't make it back because of bird age.
Unfortunate issues, yeah.
Okay, what you go through after so many days and identify them and requeen them?
I'll get to that later on in the presentation. Yes. Yes, sir.
Is there any difference on the success of the grafting on the second round you put in as compared to the first round? So, you put them in day 4 and then you move them and then you put the second grafting bar in. Is the take rate less on that bar than the first bar at all?
So your question is, do I have a different success rate on my multiple days as I'm cycling them through the builder? And I don't, no. And the secret to setting up a good builder is to stock them with young bees. That is your factor, is young bees. So they're going through graft A to B in the incubator and following suit with all the subsequent graft frames. We're giving them young bees every week to make sure that they are refreshed every week. And they can run along. We run them for 3.5 weeks. That's the amount of cells I need built for my operation. And their building is good from the start as they are at the end. Yeah. Okay, so from the incubator, we're going to transfer them to the yards. And it's very important that we don't chill these cells before they get into the nukes. A chilled cell will die on you. You got to make sure they don't overheat either. They can take cooling better than they can take heat. So you got to make sure they get transferred at the same temperature as the incubator, which is about 93 degrees Fahrenheit. So I take them out in this nifty little carry case. It's like a toolbox with a little element inside and plug it into the truck. So we can take them out to the yard and we can take our time getting there and not have to worry about them getting bruised or chilled. A lot of guys will use like a lunch kit, an insulated lunch kit with a hot water bottle inside, just to keep those cells warm to when you can take them and put them into the hive where they emerge. So this isn't necessary, but this is sure nice. I'm a grain farmer, so if there's anything that I can invest money into, I'll go buy it. Where I know there's a lot of beekeepers, they don't want to spend money on that. They'll just buy that little lunch kit where it's a lot cheaper. But I just find the logistics and everything, this makes it so much easier. It's $1,000 though. So I make up my nukes and I set them out into my mating yards. I make up my nukes on, everything's on pallets, and because I don't like to lift things, so I make them onto pallets in the easy loader, list them onto the truck, and then list them back down into my yard. But I got to be careful doing that because I got to make sure the queen gets back. So I have 2 entrances facing the one way and the one entrance facing the other way, color coded, just to give the queen a little more of a chance to get back into her nest. We're cattle farmers. We have a lot of pasture, so we have lots of beautiful mating yards. Pastures are great because big open spaces, nice and sunny. Tree lines for shelter, and hedges and trees and around for landmarks and such. So we scatter all the nukes all through the pastures. We give them a feeder pail after the cells transferred in, and then we leave them alone for absolutely 2 weeks. Or 18 days. We don't go back in there, we don't disturb them. Except for right after when we put the cell in, if we have time, we'll go through and we'll just quickly see if she's emerged. And if she hasn't, we'll put another in. But sometimes we don't have time to do that even. I spend a lot of attention. You notice a bee yard back here. So I want to be able to provide this yard with lots of drones. So I'm focusing on the availability of drones to mate with these queens. Those guys aren't going to provide me with the drones. Those drones, they're going to fly up into a congregating site, and typically, this is how it goes. If a bee can fly for 25 minutes, these drones, it's in their best interest to be up waiting for that queen more often than flying, right? So they're going to fly out of their colony, they're going to fly for 2 minutes, they're going to find a drone congregating site right close there, so they're up in their site for 20 minutes waiting for that queen. And then they'll spend another 2.5 minutes to fly back down to refuel and get back up there waiting for that queen. So this colony, this yard's going to produce drones that are nice and tight, that it's going to stay within the 2.5 minute. These queens, it's their instinct to probably because of inbreeding, they fly away. They fly a further distance to try to get away from their own drones, so there's more of a chance of them breeding with other drones. So they're going to spend more of their energy. They're going to fly like for 10 minutes away from the yard. They can fly, I think it's, a bee can fly a mile in 10 minutes. So if she flies for 10 minutes, she goes a mile away to find that drone congregating site somewhere else. So she spends 10 minutes to fly out. She goes up and she mates only for 5 minutes, right? She's going to hit up maybe 10 or 15 drones. She can do it within seconds, just like that. She's mating like that. And then she's going to fly back another 10 minutes, trip back here. So when I'm setting up these mating yards, you know, it's a nice yard here. I got a yard back there because this is a great place to raise bees, but it's probably not those drones that are going to be mating with my queen. It's going to be those colonies, those yards around, a mile around me. So that's kind of when I'm setting up my mating yards and I'm looking at my drones, they're going to mate with these guys. I'm looking a mile away. So that's just kind of the strategy I put towards that.
Do you use drone code to encourage drone production earlier?
Now, the question is whether I use drone comb to produce drones earlier in the year. That's a really good question, and I don't. I don't put any attention whatsoever towards drones. My whole strategy is the queens that I mate this year are going to produce the drones for me next year. So they're going to do it for me anyway. So I have 1,500 hives. I have these mating yards within my apiary. I have more than enough drones naturally being produced from my own stock that I've already selected. So I'm letting the bees do that themselves. By the time I put a drone frame in there, and by the time they start laying them out and they've sexually mature, I might be past my own mating season at that time. So I don't put any effort towards that because we're busy enough with other things, if you understand what I'm saying there. Yeah. Yes.
So I've noticed that I saw sassafras queens.
Yes.
Okay, is that what you use?
I base my stock on Kona queens, on Oliveras, on Saskatraz, on the whole bunch of them. I like to, just because I have like an internal breeding program, I want to bring in new genetics all the time. So I'm breeding the brilliance within my stock, but I also bring in stock like from Saskatraz as a program which I support. So I have them going on their little yard. I select what I like within those queens that I bring in, and I bring them into my breeding program. So I'm always bringing in new traits because I just feel that these hives do a lot better when they're made up with diversity, just a diverse aspect. Everything about beekeeping seems to hinge around diversity, whether it's their food or breeding, everything around it. So they just seem to do better when there's more of everything being involved. That's just how I feel. So I want to make sure that I'm breeding within my own program, and I don't want to limit themselves, so I bring in new traits, right? So as we build out these cells, you know, we're promoting comb building, we're promoting wax building, we're giving them all the food. They're stocked full of young bees. How do we get around webbing? And I don't have the answer for that other than just carrying a razor knife in my pocket. But one thing we do is we keep my graft frames. I've shaved down the bars on the side so the frame's narrow. And then we put the graft frames into the colony, and we tighten up the brood and the pulling frame to them so it's nice and tight. And when it's tighter, it seems like they're not as ambitious to fill in that comb, or fill in that space with comb. It just seems to be a lot easier to draw these cells out. So this was probably an old picture. Actually, my 4-day rotation also helps that because it kind of breaks up the bees and what they're trying to do. So as I rotate it out, this is probably in the colony for 10 days. So after the brood's hatched, the queens have emerged. They've gone out and laid. They've gone out to mate. They come back and they're laying. We're going through, I think it's about 18 days or so, 20 days, we're coming through and we're inspecting for success. Anything that doesn't show that it's mating on that 18th day or 20th day, we'll give like 2 or 3 days grace. If that colony looks like it's queen right, we'll, everything about it, they sound right, they're acting right, they're organizing their nest right. There's probably a queen in there just ready to lay. So we'll give her a couple more days. We'll tag it and just give them a couple more days. So I remember when I first started making queens, an old beekeeper told me, he said, you got to realize, Ian, that these are old German bees. They need more time. So I just give them just a little bit more time. But I mean, we got a business to run, so we don't give them a lot of time. So 25 days is way too long. So we go through and we have foundation on the outside because we have these frames of brood busting out with young bees. And we have this huge honey flow right upon our doorstep. So we have all these young bees, all this inflow coming in, and if we're not getting through in time to check for the acceptance to get space on top, they're going to swarm on us. So we put foundation on the sides, just a place to drop all that nectar. So I'll just quickly go through this. This is mating yard. Pick it up with the easy loader. So these guys, all the pails on top are successes. So we're just coming through. This year actually was a 95% success rate, which is nice because then there's hardly any dead spots to fill in. So we take them out to the summer yards. And this is where we start to manage our summer maintenance. One pain about making nukes is you got to maintain them all through the summer. It's a hell of a lot of work. So one thing I do is I manage them in multi-queen units. And I have them share the space up on top to be able to store their nectar, the incoming nectar. So I have 3 queens here, 3 6 frames, and 6 frames fit just beautifully under 2 excluders and 2 honey boxes. And this just allows me to manage these nukes through the summer without paying any attention to them whatsoever. I have them share the space on top. They fill it full of nectar, and I just kind of slap these nukes on the backside of my honey flow, and we treat them like a regular production yard. So the secret to be able to manage these multi-queen units is the queens need to be fresh. They need to be just developed. Otherwise, you have an old queen in there, she's going to bugger off on you, right? Because there's not enough space in there. But a new queen that has emerged, after the solstice, heavy flows coming in, she's going to keep herself nice, neat, and tight in that box and maintain her nest as long as she has space to put all the honey up on top here. I use queen, like metal-bound queen excluders, because plastic are too wavy like this, right? So if a queen gets from here into there, lights out, right? They'll fight. So you got to make sure that the 2 queens can't get at each other. The bees will mingle, not a problem, because the nest kind of defends themselves down here, and then they'll share the space up on top.
Are those 2 5-frame nukes?
These are 2 5s under a stack, yeah. So last year, this is a picture of my 5-frame nukes from last year, and each stack, I yielded like 6 to 7 boxes off 2 nukes, and those boxes weighed 70 pounds. And if you consider a 25-pound tear, so that's about 45 pounds of honey per box coming off. So I was getting 270 to 315 pounds per stack of bees, which is roughly 150 pounds of honey production per one of those little 5-frame nukes made later into June. So that just represents the amount of available resource we have out there, and I'm able to capitalize on all that by using these little guys to make me money. I just love these 6 frames because they fit so nice and neat and tight underneath 2 boxes. They're just built perfectly to fit under 2 boxes. And it just makes the yard look so much neat and tidy. I have just a little touch of OCD. I don't know if you noticed through my pictures in that. Everything's in straight lines. Everything's stacked up straight. And these 6 frames stacked under 2 boxes, it's just straight lines all over the place. I just love it. It's no good for mating queens and bees because bees don't like, that perfectionist nature. But yes, sir. That's a good question. So your question is whether or not I merge these colonies together with a slow introduction with newspaper is when I'm merging 2 colonies together, and I don't. I used to, and then I also used to use Honey Bee Healthy just to try to confuse the scents. And then we got busy one year and I forgot the Honey Bee Healthy and we just started slapping boxes. It made absolutely no difference. They're so focused on the honey out there, they could give a damn what's going on. The nests in here, the young bees are defending their queen. And all the bees are just so busy dropping their payload to get the work done, I don't think they pay any attention to what's going on. So I kind of hinge on those facts that are going on at that time. In the spring, when I'm merging small colonies, like what you're talking about, to a bigger one, I want to do it in more of a slow merger process just to help mingle the smell of the 2 queens, because the one I'm putting on top is a small hive, and the bottom one's a great big hive. So I just got to make sure that they accept each other so they don't fight themselves to death. So I winter everything inside. I can winter smaller units more successfully inside because of our cold weather. So I'm able to hinge on the fact of getting these smaller units through winter with a smaller amount of honey by managing them in a climate-controlled building. And I use this whole NUC program as my fight against attrition. And this is one of the side benefits. I didn't expect this to happen, but so I'm going through the apiary and I'm identifying all the poor hives, the hives that are failing on me, and I can instantly replace those colonies with a battery of NUCs I have behind me at all times. So I'm going through and I'm assessing these colonies, and same as you, I'm terrible for it. I'm going through, I'm looking, oh, that's a laying queen, it's not doing so well, but I'm going to give it a chance. But why am I giving that queen a chance? Because she has no potential left in her. Pinch off that queen, send that NUC back to silage, refresh itself in the mating yard, and then with that battery of NUCs behind you, drop a productive one in there. So that hive isn't just a placeholder. It turns into a productive hive. It just helps with my bottom line. It helps keep every single one of my places within my apiary as a productive space. So I just found that this whole NUC strategy I've involved by allowing me to have this surplus of NUCs behind me at all times, it just helps me make better decisions and keeping my apiary a lot more productive. And I showed you this earlier this morning where I make my assessments. So, I make my assessment. If I don't find her there, I find those poor colonies later on in the spring, right here, and that's when I target those hives. And instead of investing more money into them just to sustain them, to not make me any money, I put a productive colony in its place, and I take that colony back to the start, salvage those bees in there by refreshing it with a new queen cell.
When you say we put a NUC into place, you put it into a 10 frame?
Yes, I take the NUCs that are behind me at that time. Maybe they're already in 10 frames, I don't know. But simply just taking that new colony and putting it into that place, into that 10 frame box to move forward. Those NUCs behind me are built last year, right? So those are mature. They're going to be put into 10 frame equipment the following year. I'm just about to get to that. So in the spring, we feed them up. As I was saying earlier, these NUCs are very tight. They fill them right full of brood, so we don't have any space whatsoever for any food in there. So when we take away their honey, we are going to send these guys into instant starvation. So we got to be quick with the feed behind them just to make sure they sustain themselves. Syrup makes a terrific feed. These little 5-framers, we're bulking them up. I have these little gallon pails to sit on top, and we overwinter them indoors. How much time do I have? Over 6 minutes? Okay, maybe I'll leave that there. Do I have time for questions? Okay. Okay, so I'll open up for questions right now.
How long is your flow on canola?
My flow of canola starts end of June, and it usually lasts until end of July into August. If the farmers have a really good spring, they have all this big equipment now, they can seed all their fields within 2 weeks, and then we have like a 2-week bloom, and But if we can get like a weather interruption just to slow these guys down, or like I always joke, I let the air of the tires on Adam's tractor tires just to slow them down in the morning. You know, if we can get the farmers to slow down their seeding, just to stage out that canola a little bit better. Last year we had 4 stages of canola. The first crop we sowed froze off, so we had to reseed. The second crop got eaten off by bugs, so we had to reseed. Third crop got froze off, so we had to reseed, so we had the fourth in there. So I had 4 different crops staggered right into August, which is just perfect, yeah.
The syrup is, describe the syrup.
The syrup is a sucrose. I feed sucrose. In the spring, I'll feed more corn syrup, more fructose, because the bees just seem to build comb better on that. But the bees winter a lot better in sucrose, I find. I used to winter on corn syrup, and it's a lot of guys do. Just I found that the fronts of my hives were messy. Like stacked up like this, they'd get all poopy in the front. As come March, they'd start to lose control themselves and they'd make a mess on the front. As soon as I switched to sucrose, it cleared right up. Like these colonies, this is March, and you can't see any poop in front of the colonies. So just the difference in feed, I think, has made all the difference. And whether or not I know what it is, but corn syrup, it can degrade in time, so maybe it's not as good for them. When they're out and flying, like who cares? It doesn't matter because they can relieve themselves, relieve their guts. But when they're in confinement for 5.5 months, it's very important. So the sucrose just seems to be a better food for them.
Have you tried a product like Manlake's closely?
No, we don't have that available up. And I think that's probably like a fructose and a sucrose mix, I'm assuming.
It's cooked at 120 degrees to invert the sugars,
Okay.
77% solid.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that, but I hear a lot of guys doing very well on it. Yes, a question back here.
Your 5-frame nukes you have in your winter storage, do you have like 4 frames solid feed? Or 5 frames?
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Like your 5-frame nukes or your 6-frame nukes in your overwinter,
Yes.
how much of the frames are solid food?
So your question is on my 5-frame or 6-frame nukes going into winter, how much of that is food? Yeah, all of it. So when that queen in the fall, as she naturally decreases her egg laying, she's making a lot of available space. And if I had Randy's chart here, I'd show you in end of October, November, that colony goes absolutely broodless. So I'm taking advantage of that fact, and I'm packing that nest. I'm using all that real estate, and I'm packing it right full of syrup. So that colony goes into winter clustered over a box full of feed. Through winter, they're going to consume that and open up space to be able to use for brood rearing later on. But that whole nest, I'll have a box full of bees going in, which is a box full of food as well. Yeah, that's mine. Yes, sir. So the question is, how do I feed my builder, my starter builder finisher? Yeah, I feed them with a fructose corn syrup is what I do, because the bees I just find they take the fructose better and turn it into wax a lot simpler and whiter wax, fresher wax. So I feed them constantly with food. It could be sucrose, whatever, doesn't matter. I'm also putting on protein patties just to help complement what's going on in there. They need the natural pollen coming in, and I have pollen frames in there for them, and I provide them that protein on top just to help create the environment of what they need to develop better cells. Yes.
If you put a foundation frame between your two grafting frames, they'll draw wax on that. Now, you're compromising not having a root frame in there, but if you don't want the vertical line, your grafting cells put a frame foundation.
Yes, that could work too. And there's enough bees within that nest that we're not worried about interrupting that cluster dynamic. You put a foundation. I'm very specific about when I manage my brood nest not to throw foundation into the center of the nests because it just kind of breaks up the whole dynamics in there. But if you have a box full of bees, it doesn't matter anymore. So you could do that. Yeah, that'd work very well. Yeah, I could see that working very well. Yes, sir.
The old model seemed to be like up in Canada, you'd have 3 heaps winter outside and the upper box with each one. Can you get away with just a single full of honey winter outside?
So the question is, can I get away with wintering outside in a single the same way I'm wintering indoors? And the answer to that is yes. I know a lot of my neighbor actually winters outdoors in singles. I also know guys that winter outdoors in doubles. A lot of guys still in doubles. A lot of the transition into single box management is specifically around varroa mite control. We find we're just in the spring, we're able to manage our mites a lot more effectively in a tight space because those little bastards can't get away from the treatment, right? So in a smaller space, we're controlling the mites better, which makes a healthier hive, which ultimately winters better too. So we're finding that we're able to winter them the same way as I do indoors, just he chooses to winter them outside. He's seeing the same success. Apparently not with the guys doing it outside with it. Like you talk about all the clustering dynamics, right? But they're also opening up that nest as they consume that food. Was it 10 pounds a month they're consuming? So they're naturally opening and all that up too. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Is that mostly with Carniolians or most Canadians use Carniolians?
Yeah, we buy a lot of stock from the States, so there's a lot of Italians coming up too. But primarily I use, as I'm going through my breeding project here and after the years, I'm just finding that the best bees seem to be those Carniolian dark bees. They just seem to thrive better. They are a smaller type conservative bee, but I know a lot of guys that don't want a little bit of a smaller nest because they're managing in 2 boxes, so they bring in bits of Italian just to brood them up a little bit later and a little bit sooner. But primarily, I'd say a lot of guys use the dark bees. Yes.
With the amount of honey that you're producing per single bee, wouldn't it be less labor intensive to leave one team full of honey through the year instead of stripping them all and then doing the labor of feeding them all sugar syrup?
Yeah, so the question is, why am I putting all the effort and taking their honey away if I'm just going to give them back syrup? It's because I sell the honey for $1.65 to $1.75 a pound, and I'm buying the syrup for a hell of a lot cheaper. What, 25 cents or 35 cents a pound? You see?
You're paying labor to go back through there and put all those sugar syrup.
Yeah, but I'm also getting that extra box of honey, so that equivalates to 50,000 pounds to me. So that's a lot of money. But the other factor to lead off that question too, and this will be the last one that I answer, canola makes terrible winter feed. Canola will harden, it'll granulate to almost like concrete. So another factor to this whole equation is we're trying to promote our nests to be able to harvest all that, because that's our money, it's our revenue, but also because the bees don't winter so well on it. So we're pushing all that canola honey up, and we're giving them this really good sugar syrup, which they winter just terrifically on. Yeah, I would argue they winter better on sugar syrup than they would on some natural honeys. That's just my opinion. Anyways, I appreciate all your interest and your questions, and thank you.